Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joe Pisapia, with my two best friends, Joe Orrico and the Welsh, and we are here to talk baseball, because that's what we do on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. The season is just around the corner. WBC action this weekend was really fun. I watched a bunch of games. The Dominican walk-off was amazing. We had the United States team playing some high school kids. It was crazy. Crazy stuff there. And of course, today on the show, we're going to talk about the must-haves, the draft day steals, the guys that we don't want to leave drafts without, and you shouldn't either. So again, make sure you go to fantasypros.com. Make sure you use all the tools. Download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard and sync all your leagues for free to use the in-season tools and the draft tools. And I'm going to talk with these two tools about the players they got to have in 2026. Let's start off here talking about players outside the top 50 ADP that we think should be in the top 25. Welsh, why don't you start us off with two guys that you think are being undervalued going into drafts and that you are drafting?
I thought we were going to do like Tool songs. We were going to like schism.
I don't know. I don't, is Tool songs really something you sing along to? I feel like it's more of a vibe. I don't know.
Definitely not sing along time. You don't get in the car and we're like, you know.
Nobody's cranking up the Tool with the windows open. I don't feel like, you know.
No, but we're just like, yeah, that's how we're rolling.
I'm sorry,
but we're not going to talk about
Tool.
No. We're not going to sing. I actually just listened to some Tool the other day. I grew up loving it, but I'll stop being a Tool and we'll talk about the players that you guys want to actually draft. So in this this vibe of like players that you can't leave your draft without, or you've got to take, you know, the foundation, I think the number one guy is Maikel García, especially if we're going to be taking a look and having that parameter of like outside the top 50. It definitely starts narrowing. It narrows what we're looking at for an elite player. But one thing I was looking at, and this became funny, I thought Geraldo Perdomo was actually kind of one of those baseline players. Like if you look at what he did last year, he was a 5-category player. And if I'm going to put a player outside the top 50 that, you know, should or could be a top 25, let's pick a top 25 overall or a top 5-tool type of player like Geraldo Perdomo. But Perdomo's cost has gone up this year. So one of the next best bets is a guy like Maikel García, who also does a little bit of everything. His runs and RBI leave a little bit to be desired, but 16 homers, 23 stolen bases. He hit 286 last year. Unlike Perdomo, he's got some really like high-end batting metrics. His hard hit rate has been really nice. He also doesn't strike out. And I think he's a guy that, you know, qualifies depending where you play at multiple positions. He's going to get you relatively 5 categories. He's probably going to be a little bit higher end on a couple of those, qualifying at like third. He can get 20 plus stolen bases. I think Maikel García is kind of a must-have based on his cost, based on position eligibility, and he does a little bit of everything. So Maikel García just is always just like flashing lights at me during drafts, and I got to get him.
All right, so Garcia's one. Do you have a pitcher that you're looking for, too?
I didn't mean to even pick this guy or another Royal, but you guys both picked a couple. I thought your names were pretty dang good here. But if you want to talk about a guy that can be a top 25 player, I think it's hard to deny Cole Ragans in here. Cole Ragans with the huge strikeout ability. Looks like he's finally healthy. You probably got to throw out a little bit of what you had last year. But what you did have in your very short stint last year was a 38% K percentage. You had a lowered walk rate, and you had a guy that had a 4.67 ERA, an expected ERA 2 runs lower. It was 2.67. So if he gets and regains where he was before, and I think Orrico has made this case, like, he's a top 25 guy. So, again, based on the cost, I have actually walked away multiple drafts. TGFBI, I walked away as my first pitcher with Cole Ragans. That he is the highest in return. His floor is a little shaky because of the injury, but why he becomes a must-have is like, I want hitters. I want hitters early on in drafts, and he has got the pure ace upside. So if he can return with that big K percentage, and really he just needs to stay healthy, he's going to be an absolute must-have outside of the top 50.
All right, Joe Orrico, what's your answer to Welsh's Royal Flush here? 2 guys outside the top 50 that you think should be inside the top 25.
I like both of his names, specifically Ragans. I've talked a lot about Ragans. So I'll start with a pitcher of my own, and it's George Kirby. Now, he dealt with a shoulder injury to begin last year. Obviously, it was only 126 innings, and it was a 4.21 ERA, so I think people on the surface were disappointed in George Kirby. But he did have the 337 FIP, 325 expected FIP, and his strikeout rate was better than it had ever been at 26%. The first couple of years of George Kirby's career, that was always kind of the problem. We weren't sure if we were going to see massive strikeout totals from him, but at 26%, with the volume that we've seen over the first couple of years of his career, George Kirby Could be a first-time 200 strikeout guy this season. The whips are always good. Even in a bad year last year, it was 119. And now a healthy George Kirby in that ballpark, I think, is primed for a top 25 return. Another guy where, to Welsh's Cole Ragans point, you want to take hitters for the first few rounds. George Kirby, maybe you'd prefer George Kirby to be your number 2, but I think he can easily function as an ace, as we've seen in the past as well. Just a year ago, George Kirby was being drafted as an ace, and I think he can get back to that form this year. Now, my hitter is also named George. Funnily enough, this was just coincidental, but it's George Springer. Not trying to be a homer here, but George Springer's ranking / ADP this year is generally about 75 to 100, depending on which site you're looking at, and it is reasonable. But George Springer, if we're talking about a guy who could finish in the top 25, George Springer was the 11th overall player last season. We do have to worry about some age fall off, but he was phenomenal and made a lot of improvements, including in his barrel rate going up to 16%. 47% hard hit rate was the best of his career. And I think maybe most importantly for George Springer, he's going to be predominantly DHing. Last year, he kind of split half and half, DHing and in the field. The Blue Jays want to keep him healthy as he continues to get older. And George Springer, now 36 years old, going to be 37 at the end of the year. They want to keep him healthy, and I think DHing is the way to do it. So another healthy George Springer season at the top of that order. Maybe he's not a first-round player again, but top 25 is definitely within reason.
All right, so we got the Royals theme. We've got the Georges theme with Joe Orrico. I don't have a theme for mine. I came to class unprepared. I just went with good players that I think are basically being grossly undervalued. I'm trying to look ahead to what I think next year's ADP is going to be and who could crack that top 25. And the first guy that just jumps off the page to me is Roman Anthony. I think he is absolutely going to be the next star of the Boston Red Sox. When you look at this slash of batting average and OBP and slugging percentage in the minor leagues, it was all star potential stuff. That's what you're looking for. I know it was a little slow start to his major league career last year, but that's a lot of rookies. That's most rookies, no matter how big the upside play is. I look at Roman Anthony and I look at the swing. I look at what he delivers in terms of contact, in terms of power, the lefty in Fenway Park, like all those things that you just love to see from Roman Anthony. I think he can deliver on all that promise. And then the other guy to me is another one where, you guys talked about like George Kirby, I feel good about as my ace. Cole Ragans, I'm still a little shaky on because of the durability factor. My guy has no durability factors. He makes 30 starts every year for the last 3 years. He strikes out 200 guys every year for the last 3 years. It's Freddy Peralta, who's pitching for a contract. He's in fantastic shape. I watched him pitch in yesterday's game as well, just to see how it was going in the spring. A little bit rough in the first inning. Second inning, he looked fantastic. Obviously, he's working on things. He's throwing a lot of changeups, so you can't always take these spring starts too seriously. What you want to see is the feel for pitching, and you want to see how they, come off the mound. Do they look good? Is the fastball sharp? All that stuff. Everything was for Freddy Peralta. So again, a guy annually who gives you a, mid to low 3 ERA, 200 strikeouts, 30 starts. That's what I want. And look, some of these players too, contextually, if you're looking for, a guy like, I would say a Cole Ragans, big strikeout potential. We know that in the head-to-head leagues is huge. If you're in OBP leagues, George Springer, huge asset as well, potentially for you there. And guys like Freddy Peralta, again, head-to-head leagues, guys who make starts every single week. It's very important. All right, we're going to transition here to some mid-round steals. These are players outside the top 125 ADP that we think should be going inside the top 75. So basically, this is about value. Joe Orrico, why don't you kick things off here with your two players that you've kind of circled here in this range?
Yeah, so I didn't mean to continue a theme, but these are both Miami Marlins players, and it's completely unintentional. But we'll start with Jakob Marsee. And I know Welsh and I have been in on Jakob Marsee going back to at least our live show in Arizona, if not even before. So I mentioned on a show a couple of weeks ago that the 3-year way that projections look at a player, they look back over the last couple of seasons, is really important. Looking at the most recent sample size can be deceiving. But on the other side of that, there are players that drastically change their makeup. And I think Jakob Marsee is one of those guys who did, in 2025, drastically change his approach at the plate. And the projections haven't really captured that. They think he's going to be a 230 hitter across the board, 225, 237, 230. He hit 292 last year. When I look at the plate discipline metrics, I think he can repeat that, at least into the 260, 270 range. He doesn't chase, makes a lot of contact, does not swing and miss. He is going to have secure playing time, really good defensive player. And we saw just last year a 47 steal, 14 home run campaign over just 98 games at AAA. He gets called up, 5 homers, 14 steals over just 55 games. I think the runway is clear for Jakob Marsee to be at the very least a top 100 player this season, and I think he can get inside the top 75 as well. And then if I'm going to talk about the other player, and that's Sandy Alcantara, The Tommy John honeymoon thing, I think, is real. The first year players come back and they tend to struggle with command and control a little bit. And Sandy, it was a rough first half, no question about it. But he did settle down over the final 8 starts of the year. He looked really good, looked more like classic Sandy. And even in that first returning year from Tommy John, it was 174 innings. I think we can get back to the 200-plus range. I think the strikeouts are going to rebound. And that command, like most guys in their second year back from Tommy John, should be quite a bit better than it was. It was only a 7.7% walk rate, but I think Sandy can get back to the 5-6% range, give you that good whip, and give you that volume. And you can function as an SP1 given how many innings he's going to pitch this year.
All right, Welsh, I don't know if you got a theme here. I kind of want to break the streak a little bit. So tell me about 2 players that you think are steals outside the top 125 ADP that should be really more like in the top 75, at least maybe going to next year's drafts.
Closest theme I have is they both play in like the state of California currently. That's about as good as I can do for you. Number 1, very popular name. I think the ADP outside the top 125 is going to start to adjust for this guy because we've talked about him a lot. I think Orrico just did a video, one of the battle videos with Lad Sedler and Rob Silver talking about this guy. And in drafts, in some instances he goes really high, in some he doesn't. But it's Emmet Sheehan, who we've been talking about on the channel for quite a long time here. 2.82 ERA last season, 89 strikeouts, sub 1 whip, and he is in the rotation this year. That is not a question. That's funny because we had this debate like a couple months ago where it was like, are we sure? And I was like, I'm sure. Like if there's anybody that's getting booted from the rotation, it ain't Emmet Sheehan. It's with the Roki stuff, and obviously that's kind of falling apart. But the negatives are this team has been in a 6-man rotation hell they're going to kind of keep rolling with. But Emmet Sheehan is starting to look like he has got elite peripherals. I mean, because we focus on Blake Snell, we focus on Tyler Glass, and obviously Yamamoto's his own path here. But Emmet Sheehan's not that far off, especially if you just blindly look at the numbers. He had an expected 3 ERA, a 30.6% K percentage, an under 8 walk percentage. Those are phenomenal numbers. And he's got a really great 3-pitch mix that he's going to roll with. His fastball is great. His slider had a 43% whiff rate, and he's going to be locked in for this season. I don't think he's coming out. I think we are going to now, projected innings are a whole nother game. He has not had over 100 over the last 2 years at the majors, or last 2 seasons played. So they could want him to only be 140, but it's a 6-man rotation. All that said, that he has got top 25 upside as an SP, and he's going outside the top 125. So I really like Emmet Sheehan, and he's kind of been on every single one of my teams. And I think, you can't trust on health, especially for a Dodgers pitcher, but it's like him and Yamamoto are the 2 guys I have a lot more faith in than really the other 2. The other one is an injured player, and he won't be playing in the state of California for too long, and it's Lawrence Butler. Now, Lawrence Butler is currently slow pacing spring. He's been on the backfield. I think he might have traveled on the Las Vegas thing, but he's not been in games. They're slowly getting him set here. But the thing is, when we're talking about top 125 guys that could be inside outside the top 125 that can be inside the top 75, in a poorish run last season, he was a 2020 guy, 21 homers, 22 stolen bases. He's altered, and as he's been kind of tweaking some things with his swing. Last year, I think he got more aggressive. His strikeout rate went up like 5%. He lost some ability to barrel and get the ball in the air, and he's looking to rectify that this year with some of these swing changes. So he's definitely got to get his own contact up. If he does, though, a 230 hitter able to go 2020, he's got the wherewithal to be a 30-30 hitter if he were to be in the 260. So I personally think that Lawrence Butler is kind of an easy bet for a player that can be inside the top, 75 pretty easy, even though there's a little bit of inherent risk.
I didn't have a theme for my first grouping, and now I feel like I've been bullied into it because you guys have had themes for every single
Find your theme.
Grouping over here. So I found a theme for my 2 guys. I kind of strung it together. My theme is once promising youngsters that we left for dead, but 2025, they came back with a vengeance and are looking like good investments in 2026. Those are my 2 guys. So the first is Noelvi Marte of the Cincinnati Reds. PED suspension, some disappointing times there, but people forget he's only 24 years old. Last year in 90 games, 14 homers, 10 steals. He had 263. I'm not trying to extrapolate because I know this is a dangerous game, but I think Noelvi Marte has at least 20 to 25 home run upside, at least 15 stolen bases in him. And if he can maintain that 263 batting average, that would be absolutely fantastic. And Noelvi Marte is also going to give you some position flexibility between the outfield and third base, which is also a huge value. If he can carve out, I know it's difficult. There's a lot of bodies in Cincinnati, but if you can carve out time every single day somewhere between DH, third base, outfield, wherever it might be, I think Noelvi Marte is going to have a huge season. And then the other guy that I don't know what it's going to take for people to believe in Trevor Rogers, but I mean, I don't know what more he could have done last year to make you buy in. 109 innings is not a small sample size. It's a pretty good sample size. And he was dominant. I don't expect a sub-2 ERA. He's 1.81. I don't expect a sub-1 whip. Even if he ends up with something in the low threes, Trevor Rogers here is going to be a very good investment, especially if he can maintain the strikeout rate. When you're striking out one guy per 9 innings, that's really good. And limiting the walks to just 29 walks in those 109 innings. He's got a good offensive behind him. To me, Trevor Rogers is a steal here, and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that people just don't seem to want to buy in on him. But I don't know why. He's 28 years old. He's entering his prime years. Lefties sometimes take a little bit longer to figure things out in terms of their mechanics, and it looks like Trevor Rogers has finally figured that out. All right, we're going to get to some late round lottery tickets here in just a moment. Before we do, quick shout out to FanTrax, because FanTrax is the place you should be playing all of your fantasy leagues in 2026. You can ultimately customize your league however you want, tailor rosters, scoring, playoffs, and more to your liking. Future draft picks for trades. If you got dynasty stuff going on, it runs 365. Basically, if you can dream it up in your fantasy brain, FanTrax can make it happen. So bring your fantasy baseball league to FanTrax today for an unbeatable user experience. Sign up today at fantrax.com/fantasypros. That's fantrax.com/fantasypros. All right, Joe Orrico, why don't you give me a late round lottery ticket that you have in your pocket here you want to cash in on? Two guys here outside the top 200 that you are taking everywhere you can get, maybe even a round or two early because you want them so damn bad.
Yeah, these are two guys that I have mentioned here on the channel, but we are in crunch time. This is the time to plant your flags, and I definitely have my flag planted on Max Muncy this season, which pains me as a Blue Jay fan, seeing what the Dodgers did to me. But I love a lot of Dodgers this year. Dodgers are good for fantasy. And Max Muncy, the big thing for me is the corrected vision, right? On April 30th, he starts wearing glasses. After that, he has a 970 OPS, a 166 WRC plus, 19 homers. He walks more than he strikes out, 15% barrel rate. And he's hitting in the best lineup in baseball at a terrible, terrible third base position. I think third base is the worst position of the year. Second stinks, but there are late second base options that I like. Third base, outside of one or two guys, including Muncy, it gets dark really quickly. So I've been taking him a lot in the early 200s, sometimes even falls to the mid 200s of your drafts. And at that point, if he doesn't work out, easy drop, but also very easy 30 home run upside in that lineup. And then Adolis García, a guy that we've talked about a little bit as well. Projections love him. Even if you look at the conservative projections, 22 home runs, 10 steals with a 240-ish batting average. And if you want to look on the more liberal side of it, 28 home runs, 14 stolen bases, a 250 batting average in a really good lineup. The Phillies will prioritize that corner outfield defense, and Adolis García is a really good defensive player. I think we will get another 600-plus plate appearances following a sub-600 season in 2025. And we could very easily see him return to that 2024 type of form, even 2023 maybe, where he hit 39 home runs. I'm not expecting 39, but if Adolis García hits 30 home runs, steals 15 bases in that lineup, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by it. The upside is real, and the price is non-existent this year.
All right, so two big bats for Joe Orrico outside the top 200. Welsh, how about for you? Two guys outside the top 200. I know one of these guys, one of my favorites from last year, didn't go well, but like you, I am buying back in a Jac Caglianone.
Yeah, Cags is a pretty popular kind of sleeper name that's out there in the aggregate ADP you can find on Fantasy Pros, where, it's going to take all the sites and it's going to average out what the ADP looks like. He's still going outside the top 200 as much as people are liking him. And I think we've talked about this whatever it was 4 or 5 months ago at this point, but it's the season as a whole last year was, you just have to clear it from your mind. He hit 157. It was atrocious. Most of the metrics were pretty bad, if we're being honest. But the things that we kept holding on to was he had an elite barrel, absolute elite bat speed, and as far as the hard hit goes, he's one of the most powerful guys in all of baseball. So it's carried over to spring training. I think he's hitting 400 in spring training. We saw the 120 off the bat, one of the hardest hit balls in the Statcast era he's putting up in spring training. And I think that level of comfortability is going to carry over. I have felt very comfortable as well that he, in that debut, he also lowered his strikeout rate. That was a big problem early on, and he was like 22% strikeout rate. So, if he just makes some of those concerted changes, he has got the underlying stuff to be a 30-plus home run hitter. Like, breakout central. I think a lot of people believe in this. I absolutely am, and I'm taking him in every single league.
One of those things, too, that I like, we always say, like, spring doesn't mean anything except for the guys. It means everything, too. Like, Caglianone is one of the guys where it means something. He's got 5 walks, 3 strikeouts. Like, the fact that he's having good at-bats, he's seeing the ball well. I know it's only spring. I know you're getting different pitchers that aren't necessarily major league caliber. But to me, that's important because that means he's confident at the plate and he's disciplined enough where he's taking his walks and he's not trying to just swing at everything there. And he's making, obviously, some very hard contact when he does.
Well, and a guy that has one of the fastest bats in baseball, he registered like a 77 mile per hour bat speed. Like, bat speed is supposed to be able to also help you with that catch up. Like, you can play back on balls. You can, if you've got good vision, that bat speed is going to help protect you. And that's what I think we're starting to see. Just super young player that got vaulted in, new position. I mean, guy was pitching 3 years ago, so like you give some benefit of the doubt for growth here, that you can throw out a year hitting 157 and that a huge breakout is imminent. So he's still going outside the top 200. And frankly, when a lot of those prospects are going, there's such a prospect fatigue. Connor Griffin is very exciting. He's he's one of the best prospects we've seen in years and years. But like, there are spots I have been in drafts, I think it happened in TGFBI, where Connor Griffin went before Jac Caglianone. And it's like, Cags is guaranteed right now. So, the prospect fatigue, even though he's not a prospect anymore for Cags, is very real. And he is just like a must-have player late. You got to take your shots. Now, the other guy is a player that I've been talking a ton about all off season. He's on every single one of my teams because you can get him outside the top 200, and it's Shane Baz. Shane Baz had a kind of nasty 4.87 ERA last year, but he got some significant innings. The biggest and most important thing is he is now with Baltimore, and the pitching environment is better for him. And he showed the splits of being in that minor league ballpark were critical. He had an over 5 ERA at home, and he had I think it was like a 3.8 or a 3.66 ERA at home or on the road when he was away from that minor league ballpark. So you now put Shane Baz in a better environment. There's a lot of run support. I like defensively what he's got. His stuff looks great. His fastball was averaging almost 2 miles per hour. It was close to 2 miles per hour more than the previous year. 26 outside of his fastball, 26 whiff percentage across all 4 of his major pitches that he uses. I think he is in line to be a really solid pitcher this year. I think he's got top 30 SP upside, and he's going well outside the top 200. So change of environment is going to be huge for Shane Baz. Absolutely no correlation or theme to these two guys, except they are 2 players that will be on all Welsh teams.
Well, I feel like Rico's, did you have a theme for yours? I feel like it was like older sluggers. Does that work? Older sluggers?
Yeah, post 30-year-old sluggers. Yeah, I guess
AARP.
that works.
ARP guys, but
pensioners,
but maybe post-type sleepers for Baz and Caglianone. I mean, the patience level for Caglianone was incredibly thin. I mean, he was just drafted 2 years ago. Let's like pump the freaking brakes, everybody. But maybe that's the theme for your Welsh picks. I don't know. Sure. For me, I actually do have a theme for this one. It's Rookie of the Year candidates, and I got 2 good ones here. JJ Wetherholt, a guy who I do think is going to break camp with the Cardinals. Another one having a great spring. Another one who has nothing left to prove in the minor leagues as far as I'm concerned. And St. Louis has to turn things over here. They have to start looking to the future because the present is still very muddy. And obviously the last couple of years of the past was disappointing. The Cardinals need to get younger. They need to get more athletic. JJ ticks all those boxes. He makes great contact. Again, you love that he gets on base. You love that he can steal bases. He's got enough pop there for sure. And then Kevin McGonigle, another guy too, where like Zach McKinstry is the only thing keeping him away right now. And that to me is not enough. I think McGonigle, I compared him to Brian Giles already. That's my comp for him in terms of players. Very similar swing, left-handed power, strong kid. Again, Brian Giles was another guy who was undersized for the Pirates. He was not as big as you might think he is. He was strong, but he was not a tall guy necessarily. McGonigle's not either. So I think sometimes some people are like, well, he's a smaller player. I don't think there's anything left for him to learn either. I know there were some people in some camps that said, let him start at AAA. Even if both of these guys end up starting at AAA, I still think by year's end, we will value them much more closer to inside the top 150 players overall than the 200 post, which is where they're going currently. So for me, McGonigle, Wetherholt, 2 rookies that I want to be aggressive on, but most importantly, patient, because Jac Caglianone taught us last year, right? Sometimes you got to be patient. Sometimes it's not going to work out. Sometimes it will. Cags is a different profile, more of a straight up slugger type guy, whereas McGonigle and especially Wetherholt are guys who are going to put the ball in play more. I think hit for pretty decent batting averages as well and get you on base as well. So again, sky's the limit. It's a great rookie class this year. So many great rookies in the American League and the National League alike. All right, we're going to get to some debates here on the program in just a moment. Before we do, I want to talk about the sponsor of our show, and that's Hard Rock Bet. Today's show is brought to you by our sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. And if you haven't tried your first bet on Hard Rock Bet, then sign up today and double your winnings on your first 10 bets for wagers of $50 or less. That's right. If you won $100 in the same game parlay, make it $200. Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app is the only legal sportsbook whenever you're in Florida, and it's also live in Arizona, Ohio, New Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Illinois, Colorado, and Michigan. It's coming soon to more states as well. Plus, Hard Rock Bet offers new promos daily, so whenever you're listening or watching, just open the app, check out what they've got in store for you that week. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit at Hard Rock Bet. All right, let's do a little price check, boys. 2 polarizing players. One Welsh loves, Orrico hates, and then vice versa. First, let's start with a Welsh guy that Joe Orrico is sour on. Let's debate Kyle Stowers, and then we'll flip the script around. So first, give the pros, Welsh, for Kyle Stowers, who had a breakout 2025 season.
Yeah, the 28-year-old hit 25 homers, 288 with an almost 370 OBP in 399 at-bats. That wasn't even 400 at-bats. Stole a few bases, over 900 OPS. If you want to look at Baseball Savant and play that game, it's red as can be. It's a beautiful profile. Outside of some whiff and chase issues, which you don't want to be dismissive of, I mean, it looks more like Ben Rice, and we're falling over ourselves for Ben Rice this year. Expected slug this past season, top 5 percentile of the league. His 19% barrel rate was top 2 percentile of the league. His hard hit rate at 52%, top 6 percentile. I mean, across the board, you're looking at a guy that was like, as far as hitting metrics go, top 10 percentile. Plus, he walked 10% of the time. And having the season cut short how it was, I think the strikeout rate raises some questions for some people. The whiff and chase rate raised some questions of like what level of repeatability is there. But also, like, I don't think he's far off. I mean, if you just extrapolate, he was an over 30 home run hitter that's hitting in the prime spot for the Marlins lineup. So if you just don't believe that this is real, and I think, again, there are some small cases in his profile that could be that, but I think this was the breakout campaign. And I think this is a high end. The barrel rate alone is the thing that makes me go sustainability. Because if he's barreling the ball like he does, he hits the ball how hard he does, good things are going to happen. Now, is he going to be a 280, 290 hitter? No, but if he's a 260 hitter and he's putting up 30 plus homers, which looks absolutely reasonable, he's probably going to step into like a 90-90 season. So I'm a big buyer on Kyle Stowers. His cost is like, I think sometimes outside the top 100. I don't think it's like super detrimental, but I think his hitting profile is pretty underrated, even with some players that, can put up some similar stats. So I'm just a really big fan of Kyle Stowers in that profile, and I think it is going to continue at a decent rate for this season.
Joe Orrico, you have the floor. Take apart the Kyle Stowers argument.
So here's where I come out on Stowers. I think that he's this year's Maikel García, and I know that's not what anybody wants to hear.
Especially Welsh, because Welsh was a big García guy last year.
Yeah, no, 100%.
That burns. That was like a paper cut with lemon juice in it for a second there. Yikes.
So here's where it comes down to. The barrel rate, the hard hit rates, the contact rates, the swinging strike percentages, they're all pretty much in line with what García did the year prior. Stowers had a slightly better barrel rate, 19 compared to 17.2, but his contact rate was a little bit worse in the zone. Maikel García, 81%, Kyle Stowers, 78%. Stowers also swings and misses a little bit more than García does, and he doesn't have the benefit of Coors, which worries me as well. Now, the 19% barrel rate is just phenomenal. Like, that's a very rare number to hit, but I would argue that makes it pretty unlikely that he's going to hit it again. If you look at the guys since 2020 who have given you a 19+% barrel rate in a season, and even lowering the threshold to 400 plate appearances. Last year, it was Judge, Ohtani, Schwarber, Cal Raleigh. Okay, those names all make sense. The year prior, it was Judge, Ohtani, Giancarlo Stanton, and Juan Soto. The year prior, it was Judge, Ohtani, Yordan Alvarez, and going 1 year prior to 2022, it's Judge, it's Alvarez, it's Schwarber, and it's Mike Trout. So it tends to be really, really elite players that live in that 19% barrel range. I think he can probably maintain like a 14 or 15, but that means that we are going to see a little bit of a drop off in home runs. As far as I'm projecting, I don't think that we're going to see 40 plus home runs given that barrel rate where it was. I just don't think it's really sustainable. And if you look at guys over the last 10 years who do have a barrel rate that's a 15% or higher, Stowers is in the 95th percentile for swing percentage and for zone swing percentage. The guys who he is comped with in that range are Luis Robert, Bryce Harper, Sal Perez, Jake Berger. There's some good and some bad in there, but all those guys following that big barrel rate year did drop 4 or 5 points the following season. The last point is the batting average. He hit 288 last year, but I think it's really driven by the 356 BABIP. I see him as more of a 240 type of hitter. And when you put it all together, I think that he can still be a decent player, but I think you can replicate what he gives you throughout the draft. I think you can find the 25 home runs with the kind of a middling type of batting average and a decent lineup. The comp that I made a couple weeks ago on Twitter was Kerry Carpenter. He's pretty much, I think it'll be the similar stat lines at the end of the season, 25, 26 home runs maybe with a 250 batting average, 70 some odd runs in RBI. I just feel like his profile is something you can kind of replicate later on in the draft.
All right, so are you in on Stowers? Are you out on Stowers? Drop your comments in the YouTube below. I know a lot of people. I like Stowers kind of at the ADP. If I can get him at a little bit of a discount, I'm happier. Just to kind of push some of the things that Joe Orrico was a little concerned with a little bit further down the trough. But we like hearing from you guys in that debate. Next player we're going to debate is somebody Joe Orrico loves and the Welsh is not as fond of. It's Jarren Duran. Now, Jarren Duran, a couple years ago, everybody was falling all over themselves to get a hold of this kid. Last year, a little bit of a down season compared to expectations. Why is 2026 a big bounce back for Jarren Duran in Boston, Joe?
I think that the price had just come down a little bit too much for Jarren Duran. This is a guy who in drafts last season was routinely going in the beginning of the second round. Anywhere in the second round, you would have seen him go, but top 20 pick in a lot of rooms last year. And now, depending on your site, between 60 and 80 is his ADP. And I think that the hate's gone a little bit too far. If you look at what he did last season, 86 runs, 84 RBI. Those are both really strong numbers. 16 home runs might have been a little bit disappointing, but coming off of a 21 home run season, it's not the end of the world. You weren't expecting 30 plus. And he still gave you 24 stolen bases. I think people will look at the batting average as being maybe a bit of a downside, but as a guy who in the previous 2 years had hit 295 and 285, the 256 with the lower BABIP does feel like a bit of an outlier there. He also had the best barrel rate of his career at 9.7%, the best hard hit rate at 47%, and the average exit velocity at 92 was also the best of his career. I think Jarren Duran is a lock for playing time, of course, but people will talk about the crowded Red Sox outfield. Maybe he gets traded, maybe he doesn't, but I think Jarren Duran is going to play the last 2 seasons, 157 and 160 games. And I think the main thing for me is just you're getting him 40 or 50 picks later than you usually were, and nothing has fundamentally changed in the profile. He's still on the right side of 30. He can still give you that power speed mix at the top of a really good lineup.
All right. Here's your chance, Welsh, to take Joe Orrico down a peg on Jarren Duran.
Well, I think, I would kind of go back to the same argument with the Stowers thing, where it's like, don't you think you can find replaceable value for an even more expensive player? We say that the fundamentally not a lot has changed, but I don't think that's a good argument. I think without anything fundamentally changing, he's getting a little bit slightly worse. I mean, he can't hit lefties. The talk is that if there is going to be any type of replacement, it's no longer Wilyer Abreu, who was kind of the Kerry Carpenter for that team. He's the everyday player that Jarren Duran might be thrown into that. Jarren has also seen a 3-year decrease at least every year. He has had a slightly lower overall zone contact percentage. I think there's some fine things in his game, but his strikeout rate went up this past year. You never saw any crazy development of power year over year. And I think the trade rumors are something to absolutely consider, especially when they're talking about San Diego. That would be another more power suppressive place if that had ever happened. But regardless of the point is that though nothing has changed, I don't think there's anything exceptional in the game. And you're looking at a guy that's going into the 60s and the 70s, and he seems overpriced. You see, it seems overpriced for a player that has got some serious platoon-based issues and has regressed in his overall gameplay. Now, he super talented player. I think Jackson Merrill kind of had some of the same stuff. I think Jackson Merrill's a much safer batting average bet, and if he steals more, he will be exceptionally better than Jarren Duran. But I feel like those two have been falling into the same spot. My main argument to it is I think his skill set based on the price that's the one that doesn't make sense. And I think that's kind of both me and Joe's arguments. Like, he doesn't buy that Kyle Stowers is going to be a 30-plus home run hitter. So if you buy him as a 25 homer guy and hitting 250, then his cost doesn't make sense. I don't think Jarren Duran makes sense if he's a 15-20 guy hitting 240 or 250 and he's potential platoon. I just don't think it makes sense to be in the top 60s. So he's kind of a fade for me. I don't see any reason that I need to get him. Guys like Michael Harris are going 20 or 30 spots later, or Rosarena is going after him, and there's just like a bevy of more outfielders. Lawrence Butler, who I talked about. Lawrence Butler hitting 230 can put up the counting stats that Jarren Duran did, and he's going 60 spots lower than Jarren Duran.
Gotta take that 230 batting average on too. I'll say this: like, I've seen enough Jarren Duran where I think he's better than the 257. Maybe he's not as good as the 295, but if he sells
his XBA was 248. I just want to point out.
Oh,
so
no,
better than his 257, but his XBA was worse.
But I also think when you take a Rafael Devers out of a lineup too, a lot of things change. They did not. Sure. I mean, Bregman is fine, but also Bregman, was at times. Trevor Story carried the offense for a good chunk there until later in the year, where things kind of opened up a little bit for guys like Roman Anthony. With you compare Jackson Merrill to him too, which is interesting because they're only going a couple picks away from each other. I think Duran is a little safer. I agree. Maybe Merrill has more upside, but the thing is, like, I've seen more Duran and I feel a little bit better about like kind of knowing who he is, especially with all the Jackson Merrill hitting left-handed pitching issues that he's had last year and even in his good year, in his big breakout rookie year. So interesting debate. We like having them here in the program. So drop your comments below. Are you in or out on Duran, on Stowers? And of course, we want you to be in on our Fantasy Fest coming up this week. That's right. Can you believe it already? March 11th, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on the channel. 4 hours of drama, suspense, love, breakups, and of course, fantasy baseball. All of those things are going to happen there. The Welsh, the Worm, myself, Joe Orrico, and of course, special guests Scott Pianowski, Lance Brozdowski, Jeff Ponce, Casey Bubba, and more are all going to join us live here on the channel. So you can watch it on our youtube.com/fantasypros-MLB channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you ring the bell till it goes ding so you get that notification that it has begun. And join us for any and all of the 4-hour live stream of the MLB Fantasy Fest. And of course, our Twitch after party where Bogman and Orrico will hang out doing a mock draft. You can get in on that, be in that mock draft live with them only on our Twitch at twitch.tv/fantasypros. Gentlemen, great stuff here for some must-haves. Who are your must-haves? Again, keep dropping them in. We're trying to help each other win our fantasy baseball leagues. That's what we're all about here at Fantasy Pros MLB. And, of course, help us get to 30,000 subscribers this year. We can do it with your help. And leading off is around the corner. Oh, my God. Baseball is almost here, if you can believe it. So that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Joe Orrico and the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.